Okay, everyone, I am back at my hotel room. It is, I don't have my watch. It's like 2 something in the morning here in Quebec. And I am feeling good. We've had a wonderful day previewing Assassin's Creed Shadows. I'm not allowed to talk about that yet. I will be allowed to talk about it on January 23rd, so make sure to subscribe to get notified when that video goes up, because I have thoughts, as I'm sure you can imagine. But before that, today in this little video, I wanted to talk about some news that just broke tonight while I was out and about, or today, this afternoon, whatever, time zones are weird. PlayStation has canceled 2 games. Okay, not that shocking, right? Not that stunning. The 2 games they've canceled are from Sony Bend, the guys behind Days Gone, and Bluepoint. Very interesting. Bluepoint being the guys behind the Demon's Souls remake and a lot of other amazing remakes as well. All we've known is that Sony Bend, out of Bend, Oregon, are working on some live service game, some multiplayer game that utilized the amazing systems from Days Gone, the open world systems, maybe the zombie systems. It wasn't really clear. We never heard much about it, but we knew they were working on something like that. And then Bluepoint, we just, like, the rumors were they were working on a new IP. That's what everybody was saying. All the rumors were saying they were working on a new IP. They were working on something fresh, something new, not a remake. And Jason Schreier just reported that both of their games are canceled, and that Bluepoint's game was, and you're gonna think I'm joking, but this is very serious and totally legitimate. This is what he's saying. Bluepoint was working on a God of War live service game. A God of War live service spin-off game. I'm at a loss for words, frankly. I mean, I'm going to pace. Okay, so forgive me. I'm going to pick up my camera and pace. Part of this is because, little spoiler, I already filmed this video. I filmed it for like 20-something minutes. And then I realized I never pressed record because it's 2 in the morning and my brain is fried. So I'm just going to ramble and pace as we go through this. There's multiple ways to tackle this because it's so insane. But initial thoughts are, how on earth did they ever think this was a good idea? I mean, Bluepoint, masters of the remake, Demon's Souls, phenomenal. Everything else they did was fantastic. And so they acquire Bluepoint and they're like, yes, welcome to the family. We're going to let you do something amazing. What does Herman Holst and Jim Ryan, what do they give Bluepoint to work on? They give them a live service God of War spin-off game? What? Like, who thought that was a good idea? I cannot think of a single person who would have heard that pitch and said, that's a good idea. You know, I remember talking to Joe Raptor on the podcast about the potential of an Atreus spin-off game, how that maybe made sense, because they signal it a lot in the ending of God of War Ragnarok that he's going to go off, have his own adventures, he's going to do his own thing. Kratos is like, be your own man, you can do this, and, you know, said stuff like that that pretty clearly to me signaled that they were going to do some sort of secondary adventure with Atreus. And now it seems that that secondary adventure, that spin-off adventure, was going to be a live service co-op or multiplayer game from Bluepoint, the masters of the single-player remake. I mean, it's so out of pocket. It's so not what they should have been doing that it boggles the mind, frankly. I mean, it really is bizarre. And it's another example of PlayStation going and giving a very capable studio a task for which they were wholly unequipped to handle. And that is going to a single-player expert studio that specializes in that and then asking them to make a live service game that they just have no experience, no know-how in. And then they act shocked when that doesn't work out. I mean, Naughty Dog is another fantastic example where they are an amazing world-class single-player studio, and they get tasked with making The Last of Us Factions, a massive online game. They work on it for 4+ years, going on 5 years if you count the development during The Last of Us Part 2's development cycle. And after all of that, they cancel it dump all of that work, give up on it, walk away from it for nothing, because they realized that if they were to see it all the way through, it would result in like the studio not being able to make single player games again or something. But they just realized it wasn't worth the trouble. And so they move on and they give up on it and walk away. I mean, it's unbelievable that they would realize this 4 years in, 5 years in, that, oh, maybe these guys aren't going to be that great at this type of game. Maybe this doesn't work. I mean, it really is bizarre. But the other part of this that perhaps is good news is that these cancellations mark yet more doors shutting in this live service era of PlayStation. The Jim Ryan era of PlayStation was one almost entirely defined by the pursuit of live service dollars. At the time that they greenlit it, they didn't think it would be at the expense of single player games. The goal was to double the spending on games, but spend that extra money on live service stuff. So you get all the single player stuff you love, but then also you get a ton of live service stuff in those same IP and that you know and love, but made by those same studios you know and love. Easy, fantastic. You just give them more money, they hire more people, they pump out more games. Sounds easy, right? But it didn't work out like that. They learned very quickly, but they didn't react to it or act on the lesson quickly at all, that you cannot take a single player studio and have them make a world-class live service game. It doesn't work. Like, you can't take a world-class single-player studio and have them make a world-class live service game that takes on Fortnite. It doesn't work. They're different talent sets, they're different devs, they're different designs. I mean, it's just a different thing. And they should have realized that very quickly. I mean, frankly, they should have realized that before they greenlit these projects, but they didn't. They should have learned it later, within the first year or two, but they didn't act on it until 3, 4, 5 years had passed, and hundreds of millions of dollars were flushed down the drain. And I know some people will say, well, it's not totally flushed down the drain. You know, they did R&D, they hired people, they paid those employees during that time. That's where the money went in large part. So it wasn't totally a waste. And sure, I mean, you can explain it away that way, but either way, that is money and time that could have been spent on projects that had a future, that could be successful, that could see the light of day, when these live service games, frankly, never stood a chance. Because a bad idea will always be a bad idea. It doesn't matter how well executed the bad idea is. If it's a bad idea, it's just not gonna work. You know, I like, as well executed as you could possibly do it, Concord was always doomed to be just forgettable and unremarkable, because it was an unremarkable idea. I mean, from the outset, the concept just wasn't good. It wasn't good enough to be successful. And so it didn't matter how good the execution was. It was never going to find the success it needed to. And that's kind of where PlayStation has found themselves, where they have a lot of these projects working and they're not that good of concepts. I mean, they weren't that great of ideas, and they're just now canceling stuff and moving on. And, you know, the God of War live service game being a great example. Like, who thought that was a good idea? I do not know. I mean, at this point, we're never going to see the game, most likely, unless it leaks in some crazy way. Maybe the concept they had, maybe the gameplay they had was so good that it actually could have been great. But if it were so good, I think we would have seen it. I think it would have seen the light of day. So that brings me to kind of what all of this is building up to, which is that maybe the good news is that this marks the end of this PlayStation live service era. Because with these couple of cancellations, they've now canceled, I believe, 8 or 9 of the live service games, of the 12 live service games they had in the works just a couple of years ago. And their goal was to get these 12 live service games out in the next 3-4 years at the time that they made these announcements. And now that all of those are canceled, the only ones remaining that I can think of at 2 a.m. in my hotel room are Fair Game $, Marathon, that's still out there, and the Horizon live service game. And there might be one more, but I can't think of it. I mean, if Herman is just shutting down these 2 other studios' games to free up more cash for the Horizon game, I'm going to find that really funny if that ends up failing. You know, the green lighting of Fair Game $, and keeping that afloat while canceling Blue Point's game and Sony Ben's game, That's interesting to me because I think Fair Game Dollar Sign looks like a game called Fair Game Dollar Sign, which I think is is all you need to hear about it. But if they're just trying to free up capital, this is going to do that. And, we'll see in the next year how those games turn out. But after all of these have fallen off and they're left with just a few, I don't know if there's another way to interpret it than PlayStation is kind of cutting their losses with the live service games. Because for years, the strategy was put the live service stuff out and hope it does well. And if it doesn't, oh well, we lose money, but we just need one hit to pay for all of the failures. But now they're canceling all of them before they even try, which tells you either they're just strategically shifting completely, or those games really were so bad that they were like, this isn't gonna work. Or they're just realizing, you know what, we can make a lot more money having Bluepoint finally do that Bloodborne remake and Sony Bend do a Days Gone 2 mini spinoff or whatever, compared to having them do live service stuff that's going to flop. And it sucks that, they have to waste 4+ years of dev time, but, I guess better late than never. But it really is just remarkable. I'm actually here at this event with Joel Raptor. He's here as part of it. He's here in Quebec. And when this news popped, we talked about it because we had talked about this on the podcast on Luke Stevens Live. And one of my predictions for 2025 was that I think there's a really good chance that Herman Holst is gone by the end of this year as co-CEO, because I mean, maybe it's unreasonable of me, but I would think there's got to be some threshold where there's a certain number of billions of dollars that you lose that disqualifies you from your position. At some point, is it $3 billion wasted? Is it $4 billion? Is it $5 billion wasted? Like, at some point, you are the one to blame. And for him, I understand Jim Ryan made a lot of these decisions. I understand it's not as simple as Herman Holst did all of this. I get it. But he's the one at the helm. I mean, he is the one steering the ship right now, and he has been in a position of serious leadership for this whole generation. Only co-CEO recently, but in a position of serious leadership. He was, I believe, the studio director of PlayStation Studios or something like that. I forget his exact title, but he was in a very serious position before he was promoted recently as well. And at some point, you would think the leadership should suffer some consequences for horrible decisions and greenlighting projects that never stood a chance and wasting billions of dollars. And if you don't believe me that it's billions, I mean, just the Bungie deal, which has been a disaster, was like 3.7 billion. And Marathon might be okay. It might even be pretty successful. But is it $3.7 billion successful? I don't think so, personally. Fair Game Dollar Sign, maybe that makes money, but I think we'd all be surprised. The Horizon game maybe does pretty well, who knows. But just like Concord, that's another allegedly $400 million. These games from Sony Bend and Bluepoint, each of those probably represents $150, $200 million in wasted, maybe not that much, maybe each 100 million or something like that, but still hundreds of millions of dollars of wasted time and money and resources. And I mean, just there, you're over $4 billion on wasted ventures that have gone nowhere. Like, at some point, you'd think the buck would end with the person in charge, but somehow Herman has continued to be promoted. And he's very, very impressively failing upwards. So all of this to say, I mean, I'm rambling at this point because I'm baffled by it. But all of this to say, I think this most likely is an instance or an example of PlayStation making a strategic shift away from the live service games that they consider to be too risky, that they consider to be too expensive, and with low return potential, low ROI potential. And they're just shifting back to what they know and what has proven to work. And that pretty clearly is remakes, remasters, sequels, and PC ports. I think that's going to be the bread and butter throughout the rest of this generation. I think you'll see far fewer risks than you might be expecting beyond what we've already seen announced, like Wolverine and the new Naughty Dog IP, stuff like that, which of course they'll see through. But I think when it comes to taking risks, PlayStation is done for now. We'll still see the Horizon game. It should be done by this point, and so I think we see that probably by the end of 2025. We'll see Fair Game Dollar Sign at some point. Marathon is going to have playtests and previews in 2025, so we'll see more of that. But for new risks, new IP, new crazy stuff, I think we're at an end there, and live service stuff is just too risky for them, and I think they're done with it. So it's crazy. It's a crazy story, crazy development, but I'm here for it. 2025, who would have guessed? It would start so crazy, but here we are. I'm going to go to bed because it's late. It's 2 a.m., and I'm sure I'm probably not supposed to be talking. I'm in a corner room, so I don't actually have any direct neighbors next to me, which is why I feel okay talking right now, but I'm sure even down the hallway, I'm making too much noise, so I'm going to shut up. But thank you for watching. I love you all desperately. Again, subscribe for the AC Shadows videos and stuff that's going to go up on the 23rd now that I have played it. And yeah, I don't know how else to end this video because it's late and my brain is fried. I love you. Bye. I'm bad at videos. Bye. Bye.
He took my thing.